going to bore you with the same intro of myself over and over again. But the whole purpose of today is to kind of give you guys the opportunity to find out how the bidding and leasing works when it comes to offshore wind in New Jersey. And we have two really great speakers here today to help us with that. We have Jim and Bonnie. So Jim, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Whoop, what do we got going on here? Bear with me for just a second. Just like Caitlin suggested, the windows have taken over, and I want to get this screen share taken care of first. I apologize for the delay. Please hang in there. Screen share. Go. All right.
Looks good.
What do we have? Is that good?
Yep.
Great. Welcome, everybody. And thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, to let you know about the our offshore, or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's offshore wind program. My name is Jim Bennett. I'm recently retired from federal service. I spent 43 years, most of which were associated with the Outer Continental Shelf program. And I spent 7 years as the program manager, including the startups in New Jersey and New England, and the projects that are now under approval. And we're gonna talk about that. But the main part of the day is going to be, of the afternoon, is going to be spent with an auction exercise, so that you get a feel for the way it is that the government transfers authority to develop the offshore environment for wind energy. And with that, I want to turn it over to Bonnie Ram to introduce herself, and then we'll go to introductions.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bonnie Ram, and Jim's got me beat. I've only done about 23 years in the wind energy area. I started off as a federal consultant to the Federal Agency of the Department of Energy, supporting the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management with the startup of the offshore wind program. My areas of expertise are in environment and stakeholder and regulatory structures. Currently, I'm my own consultant, and also I'm affiliated with the University of Delaware Center for Research in Wind. And I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, well, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the fundamentals of offshore wind. We're going to talk with you about the authorization process and the current projects that are underway. What issues and opportunities exist in offshore wind, and a little bit about the leasing and the path forward for offshore wind, all of which is going to lead to an auction exercise, which is how the federal government provides the private sector the ability to develop offshore. But before we do that, I would like to go around and do introductions of the students that are participating. And there are a number, I think. So let's do this by school. And if I can call on the school and just provide your name and the school that you're with, and maybe your major, and that's about all. And maybe we'll have time later for the faculty and the advisors to also introduce themselves as we get into some of the discussion. But with that, let's start with Montclair.
Hello, everyone. I am Kripa Shrestha from Montclair State University. I am a PhD student doing my PhD in Environmental Science and Management. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from Montclair?
Hi, I'm from Montclair. My name is Kevin. I'm a master's student in mathematics.
Very nice. Anybody else from Montclair? And I invite you all to turn on the video if you want, because we're going to have some discussion and that will help. So please feel free to do so. Nobody else from Montclair? How about the New Jersey Institute of Technology?
Hello everyone, I'm Akyodna Swai. I'm a PhD student in electrical and computer engineering at NJIT. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Anybody else, NJIT?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Hernandez. I'm a master's student in electrical engineering, specializing in power systems.
Great. Princeton.
Hello, everyone. My name is Avery Barnett. I am currently a third-year PhD student in the School of Public and International Affairs, with my major being Public Affairs.
Great, thank you. Rowan? Not hearing anybody. Rutgers, we have a few.
Ooh, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh. Go ahead, from Rowan.
Yes, my name is Ian. I am a first-year master's student in mechanical engineering.
Okay. Rutgers.
So I'm from Rowan. I'm
Oh.
Zainab, and my major is mechanical engineering.
Thank you. Anybody else from Rowan? If not, Rutgers.
I'm Leon. I'm a PhD candidate in ecology and evolutionary biology.
Great. Evolutionary biology. Cool. Okay.
Hi there.
I-
my name
Oh, you
is-
got it.
Hi, my name is Andrea. I'm a third-year undergraduate student and majoring in meteorology.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm an undergraduate third-year student as well, and I'm majoring in materials engineering.
Hi, my name is Jiva. I'm a third-year undergraduate student as well, and I'm majoring in computer science.
Anybody else from Rutgers?
Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jessica, and I'm a second-year Master of Public Policy student.
Meet you.
And I'm Ryan, and I'm a third-year PhD student in applied math.
Okay.
I heard somebody else start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Kevin. I'm a third-year law student at Rutgers Law in Newark.
Okay.
And I am Juan. I'm a PhD student in the aerospace department, and I'm specializing in control systems.
Anybody else from Rutgers? SHU?
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a junior, and I am studying environmental studies and political science at Seton Hall.
Anybody else from Seton Hall?
Hi, I'm Caitlin, and I'm studying, I'm getting my master's in public administration at Seton Hall.
If not from Seton Hall, if nobody else from Seton Hall, then let's go to Stevens.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Chalabi from Stevens, a PhD student in the Ocean Engineering Department. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rojiar Barhamad, and I'm a PhD student in civil engineering. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Javad, PhD student in geotechnical engineering from Stevens. Thank you.
Okay. If nobody else from Stevens, Stockton, I think, is the last college that I have listed here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dylan Ermir, and I am a senior in the poli-sci undergrad program at Stockton.
Hi, my name's Emma. I'm a senior in undergrad in applied physics.
All right. Anybody else from Stockton? Any other students that I left out that didn't get a chance? If not, that's great. Appreciate everybody introducing themselves. I think it's important as we move to some discussion, questions and discussions. And I do want to mention that throughout, let's feel free to ask questions, feel free to interrupt or enter anything in chat. And I'm going to ask some of the EDA folks. If I missed something in chat, please bring it to my attention, because the questions that you have are the most important thing as we work through this presentation and process. I'm going to take a few minutes on the topic, give you an overview of the offshore wind program at the federal level, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the auction process, and then we'll go into the auction itself after a break. So any questions on the topics we're going to cover, or anything that you want to hear about that we don't have listed? If not, let's talk about a recipe for success with ocean wind, offshore wind. There's three fundamental areas that we need to be familiar with. By the way, there's a good distribution, I noticed, of not only technical people, but there's a fair amount of political science, law, and other disciplines. And I think it's very important. I think the biggest need in the industry is for the more technical people to understand the process side, and for the process side to understand better about the technical aspects of these projects, because bringing those together are critical. But let's talk about the fundamentals. First off, of course, in order to have a successful program, you have to have the wind resource. And the United States has that in great abundance, particularly on the east and west coast, as you can see in this diagram here, and very notably in the Mid-Atlantic and the New York Bight areas off of New York and New Jersey. The second piece of the puzzle is a buildable environment, and I want to note that you've got two different technologies here. Bottom-founded technologies on the right and floating technologies on the left. And without getting too much into them, it is the bottom-founded technologies that have developed around the world and that are pretty much in place. The floating technologies are coming along and have been deployed, but they're a little further back, a little more complicated. And those technologies, as you can see from this diagram, the East Coast, in this light blue area here, has got a very shallow shelf, and it lends itself to these bottom-founded technologies in a very big way. The West Coast is, because it drops off so rapidly into deep water, it is necessary for floating technology to be deployed there. That's the second piece, is the bottom-founded, or the shallow shelf. And the third piece is market demand. And again, the Northeast is tremendous in that front, having markets from Boston to Richmond that are very substantial. So you've got three major pieces here, the three fundamental pieces for a successful offshore wind program. But there's another piece that's kind of critical, and this program did not really take off until that piece was in place, and that is the leadership that comes from the states. The obvious example is Block Island, where the state developed an offshore wind farm within their own limits, 5 turbines of 6 megawatts each, right off of Block Island, and that's a tremendous example of leadership. And then we also have a pilot project off of Virginia as well. But the state leadership is really more in the arena of identifying renewable energy goals, and more specifically, identifying specific offshore wind goals. And the states in the Northeast have done that in a very big way, with New York and New Jersey setting the best example. I think New Jersey has actually bumped up to 11 at this point.
Yep, we're 11 gigawatts by 2040.
Thank you. This is mainly oriented towards 2030, and I think that was a number at the time. But we got to the point where these numbers were changing more quickly than we can keep them updated. But the point is that the states, in conjunction with the federal leasing program, which we're going to talk about, have really made it happen by identifying offtake mechanisms to ensure that the developers have a customer for their product, for their electricity. And those specific offtake goals and solicitations have occurred in several rounds, New York and New Jersey most obviously, but also Massachusetts and a number of other states. And that's when the program took off, when all of that happened. It's also starting to happen out in the Pacific and in the Gulf of Mexico, where we had a recent sale. Okay, why the interest? Well, those two major factors, the federal leasing program, the fundamentals combined with the federal leasing program and the state offtake program is what has moved things forward. But the other factor is technology. And this is an example of the growth of the wind turbine is very important, because as the turbine grows and as it doubles in size, basically, it quadruples in output. And these turbines that you see here are the ones that are currently deployed off of Block Island and off of Virginia. But what's getting installed right now through the approved projects includes Vineyard Wind and South Fork up off of Massachusetts. And this is an image of a 12 megawatt, but those have actually been boosted to 15. And the reason that all of this is important is because the cost of energy decreases as these turbines increase in size. They're actually, at one point, they were working on a 50 megawatt machine deploying some other technology that's pretty far off in the distance, but the growth has been pretty substantial. And why is this important? Well, what we've seen is that with the assistance of what's going on in Europe and our own technology developments and other factors, is that the price, notwithstanding inflationary pressures and the like, the price of offshore energy has decreased basically over the past decade or so by about 50%. And the anticipation is that decrease will continue to occur in the coming decade through 2030. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's very important to note that it's not just putting wind turbines out in the ocean that makes this program run. It's a very complicated process of harnessing the offshore wind energy through wind turbines, but then ensuring that the cables are laid. Very, very, very major undertaking to get the electricity to an offshore substation, which is part of the projects. And then from there to through a landfall to an onshore location and transmission into the grid system. I want to note that the administration has set a goal of 30 gigawatts by 2030 nationwide. It's the first ever national goal, and it's going to be a very hard goal to meet. But it's a step in the right direction as far as encouraging offshore wind development. Before we talk about process, I want to have a little discussion. I want to hear some input from everybody on that goal. And I'd like to start it off by referring back to what we talked about earlier in jurisdiction and ask, who owns the ocean? Anybody can answer. And there's no wrong answer.
It's international.
It's international. Well, I'm not sure that ownership quite applies. Other thoughts?
Belongs to
Like
the
to-
country.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Belongs to the country.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of international and belongs to the country and to the states. It's important to note that for the United States, the state jurisdiction extends out to 3 miles for most states. There's a couple of exceptions, but the state has jurisdiction over the water resource or the area for 3 miles offshore. Beyond 3 miles, it comes under the jurisdiction of the federal government of the United States out to the exclusive economic zone, the extent of the exclusive economic zone. And beyond that, it's international, as was suggested. The reason this is important is because states only have jurisdiction out to 3 miles. Most of these projects are further offshore and they fall under federal jurisdiction. And in particular, they become under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the program that I ran for 7 years. And that leasing program is what provides the areas to developers working in conjunction with the state to get the private sector developers interested and make it economic and move forward and combine the offshore activities with the onshore activities to have a successful project. It is important to note that unlike other programs like the oil and gas program in the Gulf of Mexico, this program requires essentially that this resource be sent and consumed essentially immediately, as opposed to storage and distribution and storage again that you can do with oil and gas. So that's the overall framework of international, federal, and state and onshore distribution. Any questions? Any comments on the goals that are being set?
All the projects of offshore wind turbine in New Jersey are in this region where we are not more than 3 miles away from the shore, right?
No, they are. There are a couple of projects down in the Atlantic City area, but they're essentially onshore. The projects off the Ocean Wind and the Atlantic Shores project off of New Jersey are both in federal waters, and they have leases under this program from the federal government.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about process. How does the federal government identify and auction off these areas? It's a fairly lengthy process that includes planning and analysis, working with state intergovernmental task forces through a call for information and nominations, and a process of identifying areas offshore that are appropriate for development and conducting appropriate environmental rules, leading to the leasing process, which takes, after a couple of years of planning and analysis, can take 1 to 2 years of proposing an area offshore and going through the final sale notice and conducting the auction, which is the exercise that we will pursue in a little bit. The results of the auction identify the issuance of leases and the developers that'll pursue things into the next phase of the process, which is site assessment, which allows for a 5-year period where developers do site characterization, get MetOcean data, and collect all of the information as well as environmental information, and conduct stakeholder engagement as much as possible to put together a construction and operations plan. What is the best plan based on the information that we have? That site assessment process leads to a construction and operations plan, which is typically approved by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management after a lot of iterations back and forth, leading to further engineering and engineering design and environmental mitigation, and includes a plan for decommissioning at the end of the term, which can be anywhere from 25 to 30 years. The construction and operations plan is the basis for moving forward. And although this is a little bit of an oversimplification, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, approves that plan, working with BSEE, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. But then the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, BSEE, takes over the oversight of the construction and operation of that offshore wind farm for the next 25 to 33 years. It's a long process. It can take 7, 8, 10 years to go through. I would argue that that's not unusual for projects of this size, multi-billion-dollar projects using new technology in a completely new environment. But there's always the desire to shorten that process and get projects moving along. Any questions?
I have a question.
Go.
Yes, I wanted to know all the survey that has been done, is it accessible to public as well? Can we see what is the findings from the surveys?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, the information collected at this point is proprietary to the developer that is collecting it. There are instances where the developer shares that information. There are instances where some information is already available, but as they collect the information under this process as it currently stands, it's proprietary for their use.
Thank you.
I do need to mention a couple things about the process, and that one is that there is very extensive intergovernmental and stakeholder involvement, both with the states and the local governments, as well as the general public. And there is also a studies program that has, I think it's in the neighborhood of $50 million at this point, a lot more of which is devoted to OCS activities supporting offshore commercial wind development. And there's a link there if you want to take a look at that. Any questions about the authorization process? Too long? Too short? I will note that the argument is most commonly heard that it is too long, but of course, as soon as you start to identify where you can save some time, there's usually an interest group of one sort or another that is not very happy about it. Wildlife is a great example. Reducing the amount of surveying or eliminating survey requirements for marine mammals could be a time saver, but you pay a price in terms of environmental protection. Any other questions or observations?
Is this what results in like the weird shapes sometimes of the area? Like when we were looking at that map, they sometimes have strange little carve outs and little pieces that are not leased out or something. And I was always wondering why.
Great question. You bet. Typically, the process identifies a very large area, often stimulated by suggestions from the state that we start to examine, and we put out, like I said, the call for information, and we get feedback from the states. We get feedback from the public. We get the United States Coast Guard identifies, well, that's all well and good, but this whole area right here is part of an existing transit lane, and you really can't put a commercial wind farm in there. But that is exactly what happens, and that is exactly why you end up with odd-shaped or seemingly odd-shaped areas. Commercial fisheries, of course, is another reason why those shapes are that way. And at the same time, the desire is to identify areas that can support a commercially viable wind farm, which is in the neighborhood of 800 megawatts to a gigawatt. And so you have all those forces at play, and the process, which takes several years, is one of bringing those all together and identifying areas. As we will in the auction exercise, you'll be given some areas that are the result of that area identification process. Okay. All right, well, what does the program look like right now? We've got 11 completed leases. Actually, I think that's 13 at this point. 27 commercial leases issued on the East Coast, from the Carolinas to Massachusetts. We've had a couple of research leases, site assessment plan approved. It's more like it's closer to 20 at this point. General activities plans is the same as a COP for basically for research projects. And the power line that goes from Block Island to Rhode Island, which goes through federal OCS waters, and as a result has a general activities plan. The main thing is the construction operations plan is the main focus right now, and we've had 18 submitted since 2021. We now have 4 approved. 2 more have been approved. The Vineyard Wind project, and actually 5. The Vineyard Wind project and the South Fork project up in Massachusetts, and the Ocean Wind project, which has run into some difficulties in New Jersey, is also approved at this point. And there are more underway. There's 10 under review. Other COPs have been submitted, and there's 4 areas that are also under consideration for further leasing. We have steel in the water for the Outer Continental Shelf off the coast of Virginia, 2 turbines, and they're 6 megawatt turbines. They were staged out of Halifax because of Jones Act concerns, and they have been commissioned and are delivering very marginal amounts of electricity at this point. But the point of these two turbines was to learn, because right behind these 2 turbines, there's going to be a 2 gigawatt wind farm by Dominion Energy, and developed by Dominion Energy, and they're actually have just received their go ahead for their construction and operation. That will be probably by the time it's done, it may no longer be true, but when it's right now, it would be the biggest wind farm in the world. It's a pretty substantial undertaking, and the pilot project, this initial effort, is what got us there. Vineyard Wind is approved. It's under its current stages installation. They're actually putting the monopiles in. South Fork, a much smaller project, is also in the installation phase, although I don't know that they have any actual monopiles installed. Installation includes an awful lot of work, both offshore and onshore, but they are moving forward on that. Ocean Wind is a project you may be familiar with off of New Jersey, and it has decided not to move forward in under its current arrangement, both technically and economically, and they still hold the lease. They have an approved construction operations plan, and we'll be looking to do something that's more viable economically than what was proposed. Revolution Wind is the other one that's approved up in Massachusetts. You've got the Empire Wind project, which I don't believe it's quite has approval yet, but it's very close. And the Dominion project, which I understand has just received approval off of Virginia. Those are some of the projects, some of the main projects. The main thing, though, is that we got a lot going on. And over the course of this decade and through 2030, you're looking at 15, potentially 18 projects or so being constructed in the Northeast. And that's going to generate an awful lot of offshore wind energy compared to just 10 years prior, when it was essentially zero. But you have a variety of these projects. And just to give you an idea of the process and the anticipated activity, including construction and operation plan approval and construction activity over the course of the next over the next several years, there's going to be a pretty regular amount of activity offshore. All right, what does all of this programming activity do for one, the economy, employments? You have as many as 80,000 jobs associated with an offshore wind farm. Industrial synergies. This is a picture, by the way, of the Block Island Foundations, a bottom-founded technology off of Rhode Island. They were built in Houma, Louisiana, by an offshore oil and gas manufacturer, and they were barged around. So there was opportunity. We, as a nation, we enjoyed the existing technology and the existing industry in the Gulf of Mexico and its contribution to the development of offshore wind on the East Coast. I talked a little bit about turbine size earlier. Transmission is a huge issue because as these projects come online, the grid is not now ready to receive them and is going to need to be upgraded in a number of different places for it to work. There are radar issues that can be dealt with, wildlife issues like the northern right whale that you've probably seen articles about in the paper. A lot of concern that the activity, the construction activity, and even the surveying activity is something that is detrimental to wildlife. The coastal communities and the property owners, as you might expect, are very concerned about visual effects in a negative way. The first project that was pursued, the Cape Wind project off of Massachusetts, basically did not go forward because of this concern. But we're a little further offshore now. Navigation, the question, Kevin, that you asked earlier, navigation is one of those concerns that is fundamental to identifying the areas offshore that can be moved forward, because the navigation lanes are basically prohibitive in terms of moving forward with any lease areas in the navigation lanes. And that's something we work very closely. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management works very closely with the Coast Guard. Commercial and recreational fishing is a major issue as well. There's very strong opposition, a very strong concern about the activities of offshore wind and how it might affect the commercial fishing industry. And those are issues that need to be worked through over time. Any questions about the issues and opportunities? Anything that you're hearing in New Jersey, as I'm sure you have, there was a lot of concern on the Jersey Shore about this in the past year or so. And my observation on it is that this is when it's come to light, but it's a process that's been going on for a very long period of time. And I do think I will suggest to you very strongly that you get educated about claims that are being made before you make decisions on whether or not they are valid claims. Very concerned about misinformation out there on the effects of offshore wind. Any observations? All right, let's talk about the history of leasing real quick. And I'm going to note that the authority was created for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in 2005, and a regulatory program was put in place in 2009. Leasing began in earnest in 2013, and you can see this first lease, which went for $3.8 million, which was considered a lot at the time. But the states were not really on board at that point with offtake. And it was followed by a couple of sales that were marginal in their return to the government for the offshore area. including a couple in Massachusetts that were very small in January of 2015. And there were two other areas that were left on the table. They had an auction like we're going to do in a few minutes. And there were 4 areas up there, and only 2 of them were bid on, and they went for these very nominal amounts of money back in 2015. The states were in the process of getting on board, particularly New York and Massachusetts specifically, in providing offtake. And in November of 2015, you had the New Jersey sales, which were also very limited in return. And then in 2016, we had a massive sale. Well, it was massive at the time anyways. And that was a $42 million sale for the New York Bight, for the Empire Wind project in offshore New York and New Jersey. And that was 42 million, which you see by that blue bar right there in 2016. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you is the first entry, or the first bar is that 42 million. It's rescaled in order to accommodate what happened after that. And that includes the Equinor win for 42 million. That was the one we just looked at. That's when everyone's attention was turned to offshore wind. That's when the industry started to realize this is a very strong potential, great prospect. We had a sale in North Carolina after the New York sale. We didn't anticipate, really didn't know whether anybody was going to bid on anything off of North Carolina. A completely different regulatory environment, completely different set of environmental considerations. And Avangrid won that with a $9 million bid, which for the Bureau and for the program, that was pretty substantial, even though it was not nearly what you would get in the New York area. But then in December of 2018, those 2 areas in Massachusetts that were left on the table were split into 3. And that auction, which lasted a couple of days, each of those areas went for $135 million apiece, which the dollar figure is one thing, but what it really is an indication of the level of industry interest and private sector willingness to accept risk to move forward. And then we had another sale on the New York Bight, and it just blew everybody away with the level of interest and the amount of capital that was being invested in biddings. The smallest one was nearly double it was more than double the incredible prices that we saw in Massachusetts. The smallest lease went for more than double that amount. The largest lease went for over $1 billion for one lease. Remember that these were leases that were sold earlier in the program for less than $1 million. So it's pretty impressive. And then last year we had we followed that up with BOEM followed that up with a North Carolina, South Carolina sale, the $9 million sale. This was a little further south, down in the Carolina Bay area. But those 2 areas went for $155 and $160 million apiece, which is a tremendous change. And then we've also had a sale out in California. Remember, I told you that the technology out there is floating technology, so it's newer. There's good markets out there. But there were very substantial amounts of money spent on 5 separate leases out there. And what's not on this chart is the sale we had earlier this year in the Gulf of Mexico. There was only one buyer, but there's 4 more areas in the Gulf of Mexico that are now under consideration. Just to talk about the New York Bight sale, the main thing that we're focusing on here is these colored areas. These are the odd shapes that you mentioned earlier. These were the areas that were leased. These are not exactly the areas that are going to be in the exercise that we'll get started on. But these are the areas that had certain conditions on them. The sale was held. One lease per bidder, which is going to apply to our exercise. Why one lease per bidder? In order to ensure that there's competition and that no one interest buys up all the leases. So you have a fair amount of competition in the industry over time. There was an operating fee credit for commitments to domestic supply chain improvements and enhanced stakeholder engagement stipulations. Again, this is the New York sale. This is actually duplicative, but you can see that the various interests that bid on these lease areas ranging from 285 million to 1.1 billion. Again, I mentioned the North Carolina sales, a total of 315 million in high bids. The California leases, 757 million in high bids. And we also have leasing. The Bureau is looking at leasing in the Gulf of Maine on the East Coast, which will be floating technology, and the Gulf of Mexico. The sale was held, and we had the one bidder, the one lease that was won. Central Atlantic has now identified additional areas, although still on this side of deeper water that would require floating technology, but it's more area for lease. And Oregon has identified a couple of areas that they want to move forward with. So what's next? Any thoughts on this? Is the program moving forward fast enough? Not fast enough? Too fast? We are getting that. Bureau is getting that comment that the program is just moving too quickly.
I have a quick question on something from the previous, I think the previous slide.
Sure.
Was you said like Oregon was thinking about the leases farther offshore, but I had thought like, are you saying like that was within the 0 to 3 mile range that Oregon is thinking about?
No, I'm saying Oregon because Oregon approached the federal government and said,
okay,
we are interested in offshore wind because the wind, the electricity generated by offshore wind out in the federal area will generate electricity, which will go to Oregon. And it's a lot simpler on the West Coast where there's only 3 states. And California, of course, is the biggest one, but Oregon has expressed an interest on the East Coast. What you have, because there's 15, 16 states, depending upon how you count them. No project is strictly one state's project. That's the way the program kind of started. Everybody was thinking it would just be small projects associated with one state. And it really hasn't turned out that way on the East Coast at all. Every project involves multiple states. The leases in the New York Bight are New York and New Jersey primarily. The South Fork project, which we thought of as a Rhode Island project, after it was leased, the construction operations plan came in and they had cut a deal or came up with an offtake deal with LIPA, and they're transferring the electricity or the generation from that farm to the east shore near Montauk in Long Island. So instead of going to Rhode Island, it went to New York, and that's all of the areas that I'm talking about basically are in federal waters. But the state, we need to work very closely with the states in order for the projects to come to fruition, because the transmission goes to shore. There's a lot of state jurisdiction involved from 3 miles in and onshore, and a lot of multi-state jurisdiction involved in the transmission of the electricity. that answer your question, Kevin? Anybody else?
I've got some questions on the leasing. So I'll try to ask all of them, and you can pick a mix how you respond. But first question is, those are leases not annually; those are for the lifetime of the lease. If so, what are the typical lifetimes of the lease? I think you mentioned earlier, maybe 25 or 30 years. And then are there minimums to the bidding, as that may affect things later on in our mock auction?
Yeah, the lifetimes of the leases started out at 25 years, and it appears that the technology and the equipment and the infrastructure can certainly accommodate more than that. Now we're up to 33, although it's being argued that the leases ought to be 40 years in length. I think that answers your first question, but the second question, it certainly has an effect on what the developer is willing to bid. If they know that they have a project that will be good for 40 years as opposed to 20 years, but that's not going to be a factor in our exercise this afternoon, because that'll be fixed for everybody. Does that answer your question?
So the early adopters in the slides you just showed for $100,000 or whatever have a couple of decades at a very attractive price, because that's all in $100,000 for 20 years, or is it $100,000 a year for 20
No,
years?
that bid is for the lease itself, and those early on projects did get some latitude because the market was not there for them to develop the projects. But the bid that we're talking about is the upfront bonus bid, if you will, to secure that lease, and that lease allows them to propose and ultimately develop a commercial wind farm that will run the length of the lease, which is anywhere from 25 to 33 years. So if the risk has changed dramatically, which changes the price, but I think your assessment that those that came in early on and paid a very low fee, as is often the case in business and industry, are in a pretty good position.
Then maybe rolling off that thought, and then I'll let things go. And I'm sure it's all over the place, but what sorts of royalties does, in particular, the federal government expect off of these leases, as opposed to just the upfront that we've been talking about?
Very good question. Aside from the bid up front to secure the lease, there's a rental fee while there's nothing developed offshore, while they're still designing the construction operations plan. And then after the construction of the farm, there is a royalty, or I'm not sure that's exactly the correct term, but there's a percentage that they have to pay, and it's a formula that's in the regulations of the amount of electricity that they generate and what they get paid for that electricity. A certain percentage goes to the federal government. The other point on that is that under the law, all of those receipts go to the federal treasury. After they come in, there's consideration of revenue sharing with the states, something like they do with the state and local, with the state governments. If that answers your question.
Answers a lot. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep moving because we're running late, as often happens. This is the lease sale exercise that we're going to pursue. There are these were actual areas. The areas outlined in black were identified by NYSERDA, the power agency for the state of New York. And after we worked through the process with New York and New Jersey and other states as well, the green areas were identified as potential areas offshore, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management identified these areas: Fairways North, Fairways South, Hudson Canyon, as areas. All 5 of those green areas were included, and the lease actually included the big green area that you see modified a little bit further down. For our exercise, these 3 areas, the green areas of Fairways North, Fairways South, and Hudson Canyon, are what we are going to be moving forward with in the exercise, and you in your teams will be bidding on. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to ask, what do you think the bidding factors are that would affect how much you're willing to pay for an area? Just throw them out there.
Profit.
Yeah. And what's going to generate the profit?
Wind potential.
Excellent.
The size of it.
Size of it is kind of intended to be taken out of the equation because there's size to accommodate a commercial wind farm. But in several instances, what was thought to be an area sufficient to support 1 wind farm could actually support 2. So getting back to your profit question, that's a factor. I have a raised hand from Faith.
Would proximity to land affect it at all?
Yes, proximity to land affects costs. Proximity to land also affects where the availability of a landfall might be. Even if you're close to land, if you don't have a viable landfall to pursue, that's going to be very costly in terms of the project.
Yeah, logistical advantages in general.
Yes, good point. I'm going to suggest the political environment as well. Unless you have state and local support, the projects are not going to be able to move forward, even if there may be authority to override things. We try to make things work. So state and local opposition or interest group opposition could be a major problem. Okay, any others? All right. Auction format. What do you think of when you think of an auction? I don't know about you, but I think of a guy up on a podium that's speaking too fast to be understood, rattling off numbers and awarding a winner. Any other thoughts? What about eBay? eBay is an auction format. It's not the same as what we're going to be dealing with, but it's the same thing. It's has an auction. It has an auction format that allows bidders to interactively outbid each other. The Gulf of Mexico oil and gas program has a sealed bid auction format in which the bidders, it's not really interactive. The bidders, because a lot more is known about oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico, provide a single sealed bid, and the highest one wins that auction. What we are going to be doing is an ascending bid auction. It's an online system that was developed, frankly, at great expense to the government, to allow for bidders to be in remote locations, make bids under the rules of the auction on various areas, and basically the government says, this is the asking price. Do you want to continue in this auction, and where do you want to bid on? We set the asking price. The government sets the asking price. The bidder decides whether or not they want to move forward with accepting that asking price for the various areas. Again, in this particular instance, we're talking about these 3 areas. the other two areas are not for sale. This area here and this area here. The only things that are under consideration that you need to evaluate is the asking price for Fairways North, the asking price for Fairways South, and the asking price for Hudson Canyon. The lease is, the auction is set up and is intended to get to the point where there is one and only one bidder for each of the three areas. And when that point is arrived at, the auction is over. So we don't really know exactly where the auction is going to go. It's up to you all in pursuit of your objectives under the instructions that I assume you've all received at this point. You have been broken into 6 bidders. You should have received a letter as a member of the team for one of these 6 groups, and you are the ones that these are the qualified bidders. I will mention that whole auction process that we talked about. There is a process of submitting your application to participate in the auction, and you must demonstrate that you are legally, technically, and financially capable of fulfilling the terms of the auction and executing the development of an offshore wind farm. And with that, your decision again, and we'll come back to this because sometimes it can get pretty complicated. Each round of the auction, your team needs to decide either yes, it wants to stay alive in the auction and identify where they accept the bid. No, they do not, and they are wish to drop out of the auction. And once that decision is made, that's the end of their participation, your participation in this auction. Or the third option is to submit an exit bid, which is an actual number figure that does not reach the asking price, but is your last bid in the auction. It could conceivably win, but it's the termination of your participation in the auction. I do want to talk about one other factor that we're going to deal with, and that's being frozen. If you are, during the course of the auction, the only bidder for that area at the asking price, or even as an exit bid for that matter, you are frozen from bidding for in the next round until somebody else bids higher than you to the asking price of the government. So in a way you've won, but you haven't won until the auction is over because somebody else can come back in and say, I'll bid on that. So we'll talk more about frozen as we work through this. And we're scheduled to take, again, these are the areas. We're scheduled to take a short break. I think we can still squeeze in a 5-minute break. And I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie to talk about the mechanics that we need to pursue in order to engage in the auction, but also questions from anybody.
Anybody have questions first? You might want to talk about the letter that they received, Jim.
Okay. The letter that you received, hopefully you've had an opportunity to read it, is a letter from your corporate headquarters. It identifies for you what your instructions are as a bidder for that company, to what steps you're going to be authorized to take in the auction that is occurring, and how much money you're allowed to spend and what conditions you may be allowed to spend it under. I should identify for you, we talked about the auction format, and we also talked about some of the factors. That letter represents the consideration of all those factors. When all is said and done, that's what the company has decided they're willing to spend. So it's not, you're not evaluating the various factors. You're just pursuing, I say just, you're just pursuing the instructions to get to successfully achieve the objectives as has been identified in that letter. Did everybody, first off, did everybody get that letter?
Everyone should have gotten it.
Okay, good. And if so, are there any questions about the contents thereof? And don't reveal any anything in public session here. Bonnie, a couple of mechanics, you want to go?
Yeah. So, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but for now, now that Jim has given you the overall concept, how this is going to work on the Zoom workshop is that once we begin the workshop, we will you'll be broken into breakout sessions automatically. You don't have to think about that. And one of the first things you want to do is make sure you all are familiar with the letter and begin to, because you don't have a lot of time to discuss this. We are going to give a little bit more time on the first round since you're just getting familiar with everything. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is designate a spokesperson, because that spokesperson is going to be able to communicate with me on what your bid price is or what your decision is, depending on where we are in the rounds. So on the first round, you will say, after you decide what you want to bid or how you want to bid, and which area you want to bid, you will send me a private chat message that tells me your company, the bid price, and the area. Once we get more familiar through the rounds, you won't have to tell me your company because I'll just associate your name with company. But for the first couple of rounds, please give me your company, the bid price, and the lease auction. Yes, Jim.
I just got to make one clarification there.
Yes.
The lease price is not what you're bidding. You're either saying yes to the offering price, no to the offering price. And the only time you would give a number is when you're providing an exit bid that we're not bidding any further than this number. So your real question is, yes, I accept for whatever area, or no, I do not, in which case you're out of the auction. Or
right, yes, sorry about that. And Jim was going to give you that price, so you'll know that from the very beginning.
Why don't you put up the screen there real quick?
Okay. I think you have to stop sharing.
Oh, right, very good, thank you.
I also just want to reiterate that faculty, we are not going to have you guys participate in this. This is more so for the students, giving them the opportunity to kind of work through this on their own. You're more than welcome to observe though.
And if you could maximize that.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully everybody can see this. As I mentioned before, the three areas, Fairways North, South, and Hudson Canyon are the three areas that are under consideration. The two other areas in green are not for sale. And your action as a team is to submit a live bid by saying, yes, I accept the asking price for whatever area you've decided on, or no, I do not. In which case you're out of the auction. Keep that in mind. If you do not submit a bid, you will be out of the auction. And then, of course, the exit bid is a possibility when you're at the limit that you can spend, provide that number if it's less than the asking price, and you will be out of the auction, although you could possibly still win. And with that, should we go to any overall questions, and then we'll come back and start round one.
I have a question. Can we say yes to multiple different areas?
No, thank you. Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we had a one per bidder rule, and that applies in this auction. The government has decided that they want 3 different developers to take these 3 different areas. You cannot bid on more than one area, because if you win, you'd have 2 areas. So you have to decide which area you want to bid on and identify that to Bonnie. You can switch the area in subsequent rounds. If you've bid on Fairways North and you really like Fairways North, but it's just getting too pricey because everybody else is bidding on it or there's too much competition, in the next round, you can switch from Fairways North to Fairways South, which changes the overall equation. This auction format was set up to, the main purpose is to get a clear indication of what the market values are. And this discrimination, if you will, this delineation of the requirements is one way to do that. So you pick one area per round, one area in each round, and decide whether you want to go forward with it. And unless you're frozen by being the only bidder in that area, in subsequent rounds you'd be able to change your bid. Does that answer your question, Jiva?
Yes, definitely.
Can you please further explain what a round is?
A round, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. A round is the areas offered to all of the bidders, and the decision process of whether they're willing to accept that asking price is essentially a round. When you send your decision to Bonnie, you have made a decision for round one. At the end of round one, we assess the situation and we set new prices for the areas for round two. And you again have the question put to the group, do you want to accept that bid or do you not want to accept that asking price or not, and for which area? And then after that, we look and see if we've achieved our goal of one bidder in each of the three areas, and if not, we go to round three and you get a new set of asking prices. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And do we have access to that, in this case, this Excel sheet? I mean, do we know
Yes.
what the people are doing, or?
Yes, Bonnie is going to tally up the bids, and we'll take a break after each round to answer any questions or provide any observations, and then Bonnie will display the results of that round, and we'll review them before we go into the next round. In fact, that matrix will pretty much be on the screen the whole time. Any other questions? Let us take a 5-minute break, and we'll regroup at 1:15. No, we can't do that. It's already 1:14. We'll regroup at 1:20 for final instructions and the initiation of round one. Okay? We'll see you all at 1:20. Bonnie, are you there?
Yes, I am, Jim.
Okay,
Sorry, I almost screwed up on.
no, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think you can go ahead and display the tally sheet with the map. 'Cause
Okay.
They do not have the map up there. I have it on my screen, but that's because it's
Right.
on the slide.
You know, we have talked about that before. You know, displaying the that sheet.
Oh, do we have, oh, that's a good question. Are you
I'm
gonna be
not su-
interactively in that sheet? Or can you display the last round?
Oh yeah, no, I could display whatever. But I when they get the letters, you know, we don't distribute this, I believe.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's why they need to see it as the auction continues.
Right.
But are you going to be like entering, are you gonna be updating the spreadsheet and then displaying it or interactively?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think it's better to do it when everything is on.
I completely agree.
Okay, good.
But what will be on the screen for them to observe while you're updating the spreadsheet?
That's a good, they'll just see the meeting until I finish. You know, usually it's just takes a minute anyway.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I could have a different one that's blank, but I'm not sure that matters. You
Yeah, I
can't
think-
you can't see the people's faces and names, can you, on my screen?
No.
Okay, good, because I was trying to get rid of that, but I don't need to.
Can you expand that to make it as big as possible?
Yeah, the
think it is
problem
already.
is
Yeah.
the problem is when I do that, then the map goes off to the side.
Okay,
Yeah, and just so everybody's aware, if you have, if you press control, if you want to zoom into a certain section, like on the map, as a user, as a participant in the meeting, you can hit control and then the plus sign on your keyboard, or control and then the little wheelie thing on your mouse, and zoom in and out if they want to take a closer look at the map.
well, what I'm seeing right now, and I have my screen maximized, looks plenty big.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep it, it's at 100% right now, and then I just
think it's
move it
perfect.
around, because you can't really see the round, when I do round one, well, now you could see it with the map.
Looks good.
So I will not have this up until all the bids are in for the round one.
I wouldn't hesitate. No, I would put it up now. You can take it down when they go into the,
Okay,
or take it
I
down
gotcha.
as you're revising it, but
okay,
the bidders like to have something to refer back to and that's why we have all the map and the your action and all that good stuff.
right, so I'll just keep this up till they go into the breakout.
You can actually leave it, I don't know if they can see it, but you can leave it up while they're in the breakout. Just take it down when you're revising it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it won't come through on the breakout.
Yeah, okay.
right,
So when they come back in, they won't see it, just be revising it and put it up when you can, and we'll just have a discussion on some of their experiences.
right, and we didn't say how much time you have, you're gonna do that now, I believe.
As we go into the breakout, as we go into the round, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. No, I thought it was very good. You know, it's so interesting with your presentation that even things have changed, right? Like more.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like, I know I was even confused of like, you guys are moving much faster these days, speaking of
Yeah,
accelerate.
well, this is a hypothetical. So things have moved well beyond. I mean, these areas weren't even offered in the New York Bite Sale.
Yeah, no, I mean the old Boehm, like the numbers of cops approved, the numbers of,
Yeah.
you know, all that.
Yeah, I
It's-
got to do some updating there.
Yeah, I remember in the olden days, it would be 2 years and we wouldn't have any changes. So
Yeah.
that's refreshing, Jim.
Yep.
I think we can get started now. It's 1:24.
Oh, I'm sorry, we ran over.
That's okay.
My bad. Start my video. So I don't know whether I show up or not, but is everybody
good.
back in at this point?
Should be.
Yeah, everyone's here.
All right. Well, we've got a good distribution of participants. We're about to go into round one. What you see on your screen, and Bonnie, you jump in to explain at any point you want, is the tally sheet that we'll be using for the auction. You should be in one of the companies on the left. The asking price for any of the three areas that we're bidding on is $50,000, 50 million, excuse me. Let's gotta make sure we gotta get that right number right. $50 million. And your decision is either yes, you accept that asking price for that area. No, you do not. And that's your end. That's the end of your auction participation. Or you need to submit an exit bid, all pursuant to the instructions you've received. And if you don't follow those instructions, you'll have to answer to corporate headquarters on Monday morning. So, what else, Bonnie?
And just to remember to designate your spokesperson of who is going to communicate with me on the chat, not to everyone, just to me. I'm the auctioneer tracker. And then once we have everybody's bid from chat, then I will put the summary decisions up on the screen, and Jim will walk us through what that means and then move into round two.
Bonnie, just really quickly, sorry to interrupt. You know that chat is disabled currently, right? I assume you'll enable it when the time comes.
I will make sure to do
I was using it earlier.
Oh,
Uh,
you should be able to now.
Yeah, that worked.
Okay, yeah. Got me worried there for a minute.
All right, I will note that the auction rounds are going to be decreased by about a minute per round as we move through it. The first one, we're going to give you a full 10 minutes, even though we're a little behind schedule, and maybe we'll catch up a little later. But round one is 10 minutes. Do we have any other questions before we go out to the breakout rooms for round one? If not, it is 1:26. Please be back after having placed your bid by 1:36, and we'll move on from there.
And so I'm going to hit the button to put everybody into their breakout rooms. You'll get the 10 minutes, and you will have a 1-minute warning that pops up. So you need to get that bid to Bonnie within that 1-minute window. So make sure you wrap up any discussion, things like that, and then you will be yanked back to the main room. Obviously, if you come to consensus before then, you can submit your bid to Bonnie at that point, and then go back to the main room on your own. So I'm going to do that now.
And just to remind you to put your company name too for the first couple rounds till I get familiar who is the spokesperson. Thank you.
All right.
See you at 1:36.